All right, it's a little bit early, but we thought, hey, everybody's here. You guys want to get started? Cool. Welcome to our 2022 clinics. My name's Jerry. I have to tell you that because I forgot my badge. It's in my truck. The one that usually tows the trailer. So I change vehicles. I forget them. I might have to get another badge and put it in my other car. Okay, we can start off. Alex is going to teach us how to set up and take down the unload the trailer.
Well, everyone that's in the room right now has done it once or twice before. So, can everyone hear me? Yes? No?
Pull it a little closer. You got to talk right next to it. You got to be like right.
I got to be right next to it.
That's it.
How's that? I'd first like to start by letting everyone know there were 3 people that were really significant in designing the module layout that we have. And it took us, I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years of screwing around with different designs and so forth. But Alan, Barry, and Norm were very significant in that group early on to get that done. And we should all thank those 3 people for all the time and energy they put in doing that. One other short announcement. We've put it out in emails before, but I want to remind everyone that we are putting together a video computer setup on the modules now, and Bud is doing the work on that. And we need more photos of your home layout. So as spring comes around and you're getting things ready, let's get Bud some more photos. Okay, first slide, next slide, please. This is the large trailer. As you can see, the front of the trailer now loads the power cart and the legs. And then next to that, we have the storage rack and the tool rack. And then we have the racks with the modules in them following that. And as opposed to the old layout, we have the bridge at the end of the trailer. So it's going to be the first thing out, the bridge. And then, of course, we have some tables, some other things at the tail end. May we have the next slide, please? That's the basic footprint for the layout. There should be a team member there early on at any shows so that they can mark the location of the bridge. The distances are important, particularly when we go to the Skagit Fair. Skagit Fair has posts in the middle of the layout, so our yards cannot extend right where the post is. So we have to juggle the distance from the post as we fit in the first yard, yard 24, and the bridge and the edge of the end of the floor plan. So each module is 6 foot 8 inches by 4 foot wide. The corners measure 8 foot square. As you know, they're cut on angles in the front so that the curves, as we go around the curves of the layout, the curves match up evenly as they meet that corner end. So the bridge module goes 8 foot from the end, then you have the bridge module 6 foot 8 inches, and then the first yard is
21
feet 8 inches. So those are critical measurements when you're setting up the layout on the ground in the areas. The fairs, Linden and Puyallup, we don't have any posts to worry about. We don't have any of those issues. We just have to identify the location from the show organizers as to where we're going to be located. Next slide, please. This is the way the modules are set up. Module 1 comes off of the bridge. Module 25 comes off of the bridge. All these modules, all the way over to 11, are in the first rack that comes out of the trailer. Module 25, all the way around here to module 14, are in the second rack. The third rack contains all the yard, and all the 13 yard and module 13 and 12. Module 11 is in the first rack. When we're disassembling, we want to put those modules in the same racks. Can we have the next slide, please? So when we're unloading the trailer, of course, the tables come out first. We put those someplace else. Then we're going to take out the bridge module, and that could be placed right away in the marked location from a club member who's been there and marked it all off before we start unloading the trailers. Then we can take out the 2 racks or 3 racks, set them aside, and let's go to the next slide, please. The bridge is on a cart. If I can figure this out. On the cart, we have 2 poles. They get inserted in these little holes on each side. We need 4 members, 1 on each corner lifting it up, and then another person pulls the cart out. So when that bridge module comes out of the trailer, we can roll it over right to the identified spot, set it down, 4 people lift it up, someone pulls the cart out, and then that cart would get stored underneath the modules during the show. It's important when we set the bridge module that we have it square to the walls. At the Puyallup Fair, we were lucky enough, fortunate enough, we had a concrete line where they made joiners of the floors concrete, and we could line that first section of modules along the bridge line, 25, 24, 23, and so forth, in a straight line. The importance there is when we get around to module 10, which is the last one to go in, that we don't have a big gap. At Puyallup, we only had a 1/2 inch that we had a space to pull it in. We didn't have to manhandle the ends. The last time we were at Monroe, 2 years ago, we had a heck of a time. I think we had about 8 inches, maybe even more than that. And we were trying to shift all those modules in so we can close the gap. So when we're setting the bridge and we're bringing those modules off from each end, 25, 24, 23, and so forth down to the corner, we got to get those as square as we can. Next slide, please. And here again, we're talking about the way each rack is to be placed, each module being placed in the racks. Each rack is identified with first in, first out, or second in, second out, last in, last out. So in this particular case, and I think I said that backwards.
Yeah, that's okay. Keep going.
In this particular case, this is the first one in, the last out. That would be the yard rack. Then the middle rack contains modules 25 through 14. And then the first rack out is module 1 through 11. Next slide, please. Each module is numbered. So when we're ready to pull those things out of racks, we know where they are. They do not necessarily have to be in any particular order when we place them in there, other than those numbers that belong in that rack need to be in 1 through 11 in the first one and so on. But it doesn't matter whether they are in order inside the rack. What is important, though, is that the modules, most of them have wooden pegs in them so that we can insert them as we're laying them. Everyone knows that. Some of the modules do not have any pins in them or plugs. For example, the last module in each one of the yards has no pins. But we have red wood blocks that fit in there. We put those red blocks in so that when we're tying them into the trailer with the rope, tying them down, every module has a tie down. The reason we tie them down is so we do not want the module shifting inside the rack as Jerry's towing it down the road. All of the modules' pins, the wood pins, need to be out. So the flush end, as you can see here, has no pins in it. All the pins, pins, are on the other side of the module. Next slide, please. I think I've said most of this on this slide already. The bridge must be set first, then we can set module 1, starting in one direction, clockwise, and we can set module 25 going counterclockwise. 2 teams could be working at the same time. One team going counterclockwise or clockwise with number 1, 2, 3, 4. Another team going counterclockwise with 25, 24, 23, 22, and join at the back end. Once module 24 is set, you can start setting the yard number 24. So you almost have 3 teams working at that point. One going clockwise, one going counterclockwise, one doing the yard 24. As you get around to the end and you've set all the modules out of the first 2 racks, you can take out the modules for yard 13. Yard 13 modules have 4 legs on each one. They need to be set up with their 4 legs and set inside the center of the layout, but not joined to the outer layout at that time, until we close the gap by putting module 10 in its place. Then you can set all the 13 yards. Other things to note. Next slide, please. Right slide, thank you. 4 legs go on all corner modules. Module number 10, module 24-1, and all of the yard 13 modules. All the others, with the exception of module 25 and 1, which get 3 legs, all the other modules get 2 legs. When you're connecting the legs, if you wiggle the leg slightly as you're turning that locking screw, it helps preventing them from falling on the floor with a crashing sound. So wiggle the leg a little bit, tighten it down. Be sure, and this is pretty important, be sure you connect each module with 2 clamps as you're setting it in place. If you miss the clamps, as you're trying to set other modules in as you go along, they'll pull apart, and seeing that there's only 2 legs on them, it's going to go crashing down on the ground. So set 2 clamps at the same time. There's been some comments earlier that, gee, the clamps we have aren't the best clamps. Perhaps there'll be some money in our treasury in the future that we can upgrade the clamps to a tighter clamp. The rail joiners can be placed any time as we're setting the modules, but in most cases we do not have enough members to be doing the rail joiners at the same time we're setting the modules, so it's usually done after the modules are all closed. Next slide, please. Wiggle the legs as you're tightening them. The electrical connectors are connected underneath the modules on Velcro. Pull it off of the Velcro and connect it to the other module with the pins. When disassembling, be sure to connect it back to the Velcro. If we don't connect it back to the Velcro, they hang down, and when you're sliding this thing into the rack, the electrical connection is going to get caught, and it's going to get pulled apart, and Mark's going to have to fix it when we go to assemble it the next time. So be sure to reconnect it. Next slide, please. Electrical assembly. I've never done that until we went to Puyallup this last time. Mark did a great job with the instruction sheet that's attached to the cart. This red cord is pretty long. You need to string that from the electrical cart all the way around to module 11 and 12, where we have the sawmill and the Ferris circus and the carnival for electrical power for that. Can we have the next slide, please? Main power cord. That gets plugged into the power that the facility is supplying us. You plug that in. Connect the black electrical connections to the layout. It can be done at any location where two modules join. We've been doing it between module 24 and 25. It seems to work pretty well there. So you take that connection apart and then connect one lead into each one of those modules. You turn the transformers on with those switches here. There's two boxes here that control the handhelds or contain the handhelds. And there's a plastic container carrying box here that have the batteries. So we take the batteries out when we're disassembling, and when we're assembling, we take the batteries out of the container, put them back into the chargers. Next slide, please. Connecting the lights and the warning lights and for the bridge. The bridge has a slot here up above. The light for that is usually on top of the bridge. So you take that off of the bridge, slide it in the slot, feed the electrical connection down through that hole, and then make the connection here. And then we just plug the main power in here, and we have two switches here that control the power going to the lights, so that when we're assembling or disassembling, we can turn those off and the bell and light aren't going to be ringing all the time. But once we're ready to run, turn the switches on, and that puts power to the warning lights and the bell. Next slide, please. Other things to keep in mind. First, it's not a race on assembling this thing and a race to disassemble it. We need to take our time, particularly when it comes to removing and installing the landscaping items. Take our time. If we don't get them stacked and stored in either one of the trailers correctly, we get more damage. So when we go to set up the next time, we're spending time regluing buildings and repatching scenery. We already talked about the wood blocks at the end and the red blocks. When you're assembling the layout, take those red blocks out. If you don't pull them out, they'll get slid inside the module and you won't get it out. So you take those out and store them on one of the carts. Connect the cross bracing. At the end of each of the 2 yards, there's a metal cross bracing with Velcro. You need to install that on the end of the 2 modules. That helps support that end so it's not shifting while we're running trains and have the layout assembled. Rail joiners. If you can, leave the rail joiners on the rails when you're disassembling. It's easier to loosen them and slide them onto the adjoining rail than it is trying to get a whole rail joiner on the bottom of 2 rails and tightening the screws. So leave them on the rails if you can. In some cases, the ballast is so tight either way, it's difficult, and some of those may have to come out. But in most cases, they can be left on the rails.
And tighten them back once you slide them, so they don't fall off.
The scenery is removed out of the small trailer and placed on the layout after the rail joiners are in place. If you start setting the scenery in before all the rail joiners are on, you're moving scenery back and forth and over and around so you can get to the rail joiners. Tighten the rail joiners first, then we can put the scenery in on top and around the layout. The yellow safety chain and the green skirts can be put on anytime, set up anytime after the layout is closed, after that module 10 is put in place and it's closed up. Be sure that the electrical connections between the two modules or joining modules, they're all put together. At the Puyallup show this last time, we had all the modules connected, but we neglected to connect the two connections at the bridge. So that meant we had power everywhere except when you tried to go across the bridge. Okay, so they all need to be connected and checked. It's so important, I'm going to mention it again. The Velcro, when you're disassembling, needs to be reattached to the bottom. Mark hates to repair those connections that are pulled off. When you're taking a module in or out of the rack, if you lift it up slightly and slide it so it's only sliding on the end as it's coming in and out of the rack, it'll be easier than trying to drag that whole module across the bottom of the lip of the rack. It's important, again, with the rope that we have to tie the module ends down and secure them before we start pushing the racks into the trailer. Also, when you push the rack into the trailer, the flat end of the rack needs to go against the wall and the wood pins need to be facing the right side. So the flat end of the rack goes to the left, the pins go to the right. Next slide, please. Courtesy points for running the layout. Wear your orange hat, right? Anyone running trains, wear your orange hat. If you need to cross the main line, let everyone who's running trains know you're coming out or going in so that we have no T-bones at the intersections to the yards. If you're leaving for the day or longer than an hour or an hour and a half for lunch, you need to take your trains out of the yard onto your carrying case. If you're only going to be gone for a short while and coming back to run your trains, park them at the end of the yard, not at the throat of the yard, so that someone else can load in front of you and get out on the railroad. Also, store your trains for that short period of time on an inner yard track. So someone new coming to load and unload is not trying to reach over your train and hitting it with their elbow and cars go on the floor. We have two sidings on the outer main and the center main, middle main, for storing trains. So if you want to park for a short period of time, use those two yards on the outer main and the middle main for storing trains. You don't necessarily have to back them into the yard or pull them into the yard. Next slide, please. And this is what I'm talking about, storing a train at the throat rather than pushing it back to the end. Here's one that's pushed all the way back to the end like it should be. There's two main, outer main sidings here. Next slide, please. And then there's two middle main sidings at this location. And they're pretty long. You could put a long train on those sidings. Next slide, please. Questions, comments, complaints, observations? Anyone have anything? Mark?
We're probably gonna be asking for a work party to come out to my place sometime in the next couple of months before we go to our next destination. Some of the lashings came loose and the carts are loose in there, the racks are. Plus, we've got some changes to make. I bought some new tie-down points that I'm going to secure, so it'll make it much easier to lash the racks in. Right now, it's really hard. You know well, Jerry, it's hard to get those things lashed in, so I'm gonna try and set up something new, but probably within a couple of months, so look for an email to come out.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
you need to put a crimping tool in there. There wasn't one. We had a wire pull out, and I had problems trying to get the terminal fastened down on.
We do.
Tom, the toolbox is yours. Could you get a crimper for the toolbox? I think most of you all have assembled the layout or been there during it. I wanted to emphasize some of the key items that you may not have been aware of, and hopefully now you don't need me or Mark or Norm to help set up. You all know all the details.
What's the reason for the yard 13 needing 4 legs?
I'm sorry?
The yard 13, why does it need 4 legs on those modules?
I can answer
Oh,
that.
we put, the yard 13 has to be inside this rectangle. If we didn't put 4 legs on that, you're gonna be setting them on the floor.
No.
And then you have to go back and pick them up off the floor.
So the,
They don't absolutely need it, it just makes it easy for assembly.
yeah. So it's for assembly purposes.
Yeah.
And the reason that yard's different is because the first yard, the other yard is connected over near the bridge side, right?
That's correct.
So it's already in.
That's correct. And the 13 yard, when we slide that number 10 module in, if we have to manhandle everything, it's easier to manhandle it without having a yard attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's some of the things we learned when we put it together the first time.
Yeah.
Other questions? Again, we've all done it, we've all been there. No? Okay.
Getting up to me on time so we can have a good day. So we're gonna start out with Norm.